Good day, everyone, and welcome to the channel. I am your host, Jeff Freeman, and welcome to JFree906. And today we have my special guest co-host, Gretchen Cornwall. And we are so very, very excited today to have with us the two wonderful authors of many, many books, Clive Prince and Lynn Picknett. Welcome to the show today. Thank you for coming.
Well, thank you for having us. It's brilliant to be here.
Yes, it is wonderful. So, yes, thanks for the invite.
Well, I tell you what, we are in for a quite a show today, folks, because as I mentioned, they are authors of several books, the Templar Revelation. I think it was also the Zion Revelation, many others about Mary Magdalene and going on. But also, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, that they were the inspiration for Dan Brown's book and the movie The Da Vinci Code with Tom Hanks. Is that correct?
Yep, absolutely.
It is, yes. These days it's kind of our main claim to fame, but it's, yeah. And depending what you think of the movie, of course, it's either it's all our fault or. But no, it's true. I mean, and just to explain why we say that, because obviously Dan Brown, when he wrote his novel, The Da Vinci Code, drew on a number of sources, but the thing that gave him the idea, as he acknowledged, was reading a copy of our book, The Templar Revelation, the first chapter of which is entitled The Secret Code of Leonardo da Vinci. There's a bit of a clue there. And obviously it didn't take everything from our book, particularly went down the sacred bloodline route, which isn't something we do, but he even got into that from reading about it in our book. So it kind of directed all his research. The way he actually put it was, I got everything I needed from the Templar Revelation.
Yeah, he said that under oath in London's High Court. So it was true. It was true. Yeah.
And we actually ended up with cameos in the movie as kind of.
Yes, on the bus. Yes, I remember.
We never ever pass up an opportunity to remind people about that. I mean, you would, So it was an extraordinary day. It happened to be Clive's birthday, by the way. So what a way to celebrate!
Wow, what a great present.
Well, it was even better because I couldn't resist it. At the end of the day's filming, the whole day's filming for like 30 seconds on screen, of course. But at the end of the day, I actually said to Tom, that is Tom Hanks, obviously, our mate Tom, I said, by the way, it's Clive's birthday. Instantly, he got everybody to sing happy birthday to Clive.
Oh, wow.
So, and Clive said to me, I can't ever have another birthday because, well, he's managed a few since then.
It was quite a surreal moment because they're all singing. I'm sitting there on a bus in London with Forrest Gump, Amelie, and Richie out of Happy Days singing Happy Birthday, and I'm kind of thinking,
oh, that's awesome.
When does the alarm go and I wake up?
Oh my goodness, that is awesome. And I did, in the pre-show little video that I had, the intro there, I did have a picture of you with Tom Hanks. And I got to tell you, honestly, what I know that you have probably many highlights of your careers over the years. That has to be one of them, to be able to be a part of that.
Yeah. Well, yeah, that's the one we never shut up about.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I mean, it's hard to have there's a whole lot of stories and anecdotes about that. Yeah. But yeah, it was, and just from the professional point of view, our book Templar Revelation it came out in 1997. So this is actually the 25th anniversary year of that book coming out. It's been in print the whole time.
Wow.
But of course, the connection with the movie, because our book is actually mentioned in Dan Brown's novel. And of course, there was a lot of publicity going on around that time. A lot of kind of documentaries about fact behind the fiction that we got involved in. So, kind of it renewed interest in the book and it boosted interest and sales. So it got our work out further. So, aside from the fun we had, just sort of, making the movie and all that kind of thing. It was a good boost to us. So
yeah. I mean, we were basically we did a cameo, but outsiders might run away with the idea that we were merely extras. We weren't, of course. We were guests. But the thing is, a friend of ours who is a film producer said about me, not about Clive, but he said I was the worst extra in the world.
Oh no!
Because basically all I had to do was turn and look at Tom Hanks, and I couldn't even do that properly. And he said, "This guy
spiked the camera. You spiked the camera. You kept looking into the lens. That was really funny."
But our friend said, he said, "You looked as if you were about to order another bottle of wine," and I thought, well, I usually am. But it was really, I don't know what happened to me that day. It was obviously a form of nerves, but I was just kind of, I can't act. I can't do anything. I go, oh dear. But, but I mean, people might be wondering, exactly what our attitude to, the whole Dan Brown thing was, because obviously some authors took against him and sued him for plagiarism. That didn't work well for them. But I mean, our attitude was that basically our book was non-fiction. He was writing a novel. Mm-hmm. He was consulting our book like any other book of reference. And he gave us a credit within the pages of the Da Vinci Code itself. Yeah. So what is to hate? What is to cause a fuss about? So we were, and the fact that we were basically on side got us the cameo role in the movie, basically.
Yeah. When I first saw the film, I thought, oh my God, that's Clive and Lynn. And I just wait for it. I've seen it several times, but I just, I clock you each time, but it was just so fun at that juncture, and I did feel badly for Bajent and Lee, because I think it affected their health with the lawsuit. And I'm glad that Henry Lincoln did not participate. But I was a bit nonplussed, and I'm going to say this at some risk of being shot at virtually, but I wished they hadn't sued him, because Holy Blood, Holy Grail went back into publication because of that book, because of Dan Brown. And it went back into publication. An author's dream. Is that true, Lynn? Or
well, I'm just saying that we were at the High Court hearing every day.
Oh my word!
And wow. The judge from the very beginning couldn't understand why the case was there, why it was taken seriously. And he basically said, but you made a fortune out of this. How can you, bring yourself to do this? And it was actually horrendous watching. Lee didn't turn up, he wasn't there, but Michael Bajent took the stand. And it was like watching somebody being flayed alive. I mean, it was just horrendous. So
I'm sorry to hear that. Yeah. I wish they had not made that step for their health's sake and their families. And forgive me. Go ahead, Clive. I'm still rambling.
You're losing it. Losing the case cost them a lot of money. It's expensive.
Yeah.
And we could never work out why why they took the case, because I mean, it never seemed to us for a moment that they had much of a case for plagiarism, because it's research. But even if they'd won on some copyright thing, the next stage in any one of these kind of cases is to say, okay, the guy stole your work. How much money have you lost as a result of that? And you think their answer would be, well, our sales went up tenfold or something. It's like, so there was no, they wouldn't have made anything out of it anyway, because normally you say someone stole my work, so people didn't buy my book, so we've lost sales, so we need compensation. But in their case, it went the other way. They made a lot more money out of it. So it never made sense to us from the beginning what it was all about, and we weren't surprised that that they lost the case at all.
Well, that's something that you were there every day. And I hadn't intended to bring up the subject, but I suppose I was just dying to ask you or to interject. But it's you brought so much to the table, and your the Templar Revelation certainly deserved to be in print for 25 years, and that's a rarity in itself. To be constantly in, out there and available for people to buy. It is quite the book stop or doorstop, or you could throw it at a burglar's head, and
Yep.
but it's truly phenomenal. It is phenomenal. The scholarship is astronomical.
Yeah, I wanted to say too that I went out and I bought the audiobook, and thank goodness it was in audiobook. And I'm kind of venturing into the voiceover world myself to be able to do audiobooks and things down the road. But first of all, the guy that was picked to do it, wonderful. The man is absolutely wonderful at doing the voiceover. But I tell you, going through this, it was, I had to take notes. I mean, I was sitting down and taking notes, but the information that is in the Templar Revelation is, I mean, there's so much in there. And I from the very beginning, it just goes and goes and goes and goes and goes. And I thought, oh my goodness, how can we, even if we just talked about this book only, it would take us an 8-hour show. I mean, there was so much information, but it's really wonderful. And I suggest that anybody that wishes to get out there and get this book. It is really good. And I haven't gone into the other ones yet, but I will as we go along. But I also wanted to just say too, that I know that you guys have your own website and a Patreon channel that we do have linked in the description of the show here today. If you want to talk about that just a moment before we dig into the whole part of what you wanted to speak about today. If you wanted to speak on that, go ahead for just a moment, if you would.
Yeah, I mean, our website is, well, you've got the links there, but piquedprince.com. Where we put news and updates of what we're doing. Our Patreon channel, we use that to really do updates to our books, because Templar Revelation's been out 25 years. As you say, it covers a lot of ground, a lot of subjects. We've continued to research them, and we keep finding new things that we think, oh, we wish we'd put that in the book if we'd have known it at the time, or or corrects things as well, because we find out new information that means we didn't get something entirely right and sometimes completely wrong. Nothing major, fortunately. So we use the Patreon account as a way of getting research, new bits of research, updates, new thoughts out there. So yes, anyone who would like to subscribe to that.
But also
do.
I mean, at the moment we're in the middle of a series about the origins of the big conspiracy theories. We're talking about the real Illuminati at the moment on our joint Patreon channel. But I have my own Patreon page, which is basically 2 long installments a month of my memoirs, of my story, which actually surprised me that it's relatively interesting. And I mean, it's about me growing up in a haunted house and all sorts of other stuff, all sorts of really weird stuff. And also, meeting Clive and the books and the background to and all that kind of stuff. So,
I apologize. All I'm hearing is a terrible feedback static.
Oh, really?
I can only understand like maybe 1 word in 10. Jeff, how should we proceed? Because if I can't hear properly.
Okay. You're coming
I can't
through.
hear you either.
Okay. Let me. I'll send you a message here real quick, and let's see.
I can switch to my webcam and try with. I don't know if it's my phone or if it's the. I just would like to be able to hear and participate.
Let's see. Okay, I just sent you a message. I don't know. You're probably not hearing very well. Maybe try to switch. But you're coming through here just fine. I don't know if you're hearing this or not. So let's see.
Suddenly it's better. I do apologize.
Okay.
I do apologize.
No problem.
It seems to have cleared up.
Okay.
But I couldn't understand anything Lynn said, unfortunately. I haven't had this happen before, so I do apologize. If this holds, if you trust it, I'll just stick with what's happening now. I can hear you. Okay, so if it goes south on me, I'll simply drop out and then switch to my desktop.
Okay, sounds good.
I have a question for you, Lynn. On Patreon, you do have to sign up to Patreon. You have to open up an account. What's your lowest level to be a patron, to be both of your patrons, Clive and Lynn? $1, $3, $5? What will it?
It's £3 British, which it's a bit under $3.
$4.
So
Closer
to $4 then.
We always put it's the price of a cup of coffee a month.
Yeah.
Great. Okay, just so everybody knows that, and if you said that already, I apologize, but yeah, so it's worth signing up for the process of becoming a patron. Email address, password, and away you go, and then you can have a virtual cup of coffee with Clive and Lynn.
Yeah,
well worth it.
To put it at the price of a beer. Same thing, you know.
A microbrew, yes, a very refined vintage too.
So yeah, as we said, and Linda and Jan, they are the admins of our Facebook group, and Linda is going to put up the links there as well for all of your. You guys had emailed that to me, so I put it in the description of the show today here on YouTube, and it will also be linked on our Facebook page as well. So fantastic stuff, and that newsletter of your memoirs, that's going to be interesting. And you mentioned a haunted house. I know I kind of briefly brought it up in the pre-show meeting, talking about John Edwards and I have a channel called Beyond Our World. We have to have you on that show. So you are going to,
believe me, you do have to have us on your show.
This is going to be
well, I mean, we've had an awful lot of weird stuff happen to us over the years.
It's kind of strange because we actually met through an interest in the paranormal.
I was going to ask. That was where I was going next. So please proceed.
Yeah. Well, it was actually it was a lecture in someone's house.
1989.
In 1989, yes. But Lynn was already a writer on the paranormal, specialising in that and doing lots of radio. I at that point was just someone that read about it. But the strange thing is that as that was kind of our research interest and our background, when we write together, strangely enough, we haven't written very much about the paranormal. It tends to be like the historical mysteries. So it's kind of odd that we came from that place, but although Lynn's written separately about the paranormal, but when we write together, it tends not to be about that. So sometimes people think we may be a bit skeptical about such things. We're really not.
Really not.
I mean, we believe some really weird stuff.
Yeah.
We can outweird most people.
I mean, the stuff that went on in the tiny little house up in Yorkshire where I grew up. I mean, real and actually. One of the experts around at the moment into weird things in London, she, I was telling her my story, and she read some of my Patreon stuff, and she said, actually, this is one of the most sustained and terrifying hauntings she's ever heard of. And the thing is, it had never occurred to me. I'm allegedly an expert on the paranormal, but because I was so close to it, I thought, it's just what happened to me, kind of thing. And I didn't see it in context of comparing it to other hauntings. Wow. But actually, I take her point. It was very sustained and it was utterly terrifying. So, yes.
Wow. Wow, I can't wait to hear more about that in the future. I mean, I'm almost tempted to just say, let's go for it right here. But I know,
I know.
oh boy, that's going to be interesting. John, I see John Edwards is in the chat right now. He is my, he and I kind of both share hosting that show through the mutual concept of it, of Beyond Our World. And it's everything it is beyond our world. Paranormal, UFO, UAPs, all that kind of stuff. And he's already saying sold. He wants you on. So,
John Edwards is a paranormal magnet, so you have something in common.
Yeah.
He's got some good stories of his own. So, all right. With that said, and I would love to keep going with that, but let me just start off by asking. And again, I'm going to kind of let Gretchen take over here after I ask this initial question. I'm going to kind of take a back seat here and let you guys go. But let me kind of go back to the beginning of where you got started with an interest in all of the information you've looked for Templar Revelation and the Templars themselves. What got you started in this? What piqued your interest?
It's that kind of began. We began with Leonardo da Vinci. We got interested in him. The first book we did together was actually about the Shroud of Turin, in which we argued that actually the Shroud of Turin, with its miraculous image of Jesus on it, was actually faked by Leonardo da Vinci. So that's where we started. Just kind of looking at that one subject, and we got into that, and eventually a book came out of that, which we can talk more about, if you want to there. But then
Absolutely.
It was looking at. We got interested in Leonardo, and we got interested in what he believed. Because most people assume that, he was like the first scientist, therefore he must have not been religious, he must have not been spiritual. And he must have been an atheist, because scientists always are, kind of thing. And we found out that wasn't the case at all. So we actually got into his beliefs, which we actually found he was a heretic. And we started, this came about from actually looking at his paintings and the codes that he put into his paintings. And again, we can go into that. We can actually look at some examples of that as we go on, but just to very quickly get into like how the whole process happened, because this was all new to us. We hadn't really done history before. So we got interested in the codes in Leonardo's paintings, and we really quickly honed into the fact he had some strange thing about John the Baptist.
Yeah, it seems so.
Yeah. And once we put that together, our thought then was, okay, Leonardo had this thing about John the Baptist, who he obviously sort of seemed to reckon as greater than Jesus. But okay, we think maybe it was just some eccentric idea of his. So the next question was, could we find anyone before his time and since his time who had these same ideas? And that's where the book Templar Revelation came from, because we had looking back in history and finding out, yes, there was this whole chain of groups and individuals and sects and things that all seem to share this same belief in the importance of John the Baptist, to the point he's more important than Jesus. And that's where we got into it. One of those groups being the Templars. So hence the name of the book. But
you didn't just jump into this. I mean, both of you, if I understand correctly, have a journalistic background. Is that correct?
I do.
Okay. So you were prepared and understood the capacity, the necessity to be able to really slice and dice information is what I'm trying to express. You didn't just decide, I'm going to write a book about this, and it happened. It doesn't just happen.
No. I wish it did.
Indeed. But then everybody would, and you are traditionally published as well. But I just wanted to let everybody know that, so that they have an understanding and appreciation of your background. So you were actually prepared to do this. You didn't just wake up and decide to.
No, as Clive said, the roots of the Templar Revelation went back to our Shroud of Turin book, which is called the Turin Shroud, strangely enough. The Turin Shroud, How Leonardo da Vinci Fooled History. Bit of a giveaway. And we had all this stuff left over, which didn't about Leonardo, about Johannitism, which is the belief in John the Baptist being superior to Jesus. We just, it didn't fit in the Shroud book, but we thought, well, wait a minute, there's another book here, and it involved quite a lot of research. We had, as I say, quite a lot of research left over from the Shroud book, but we obviously had to add to it. It's a huge subject. And in fact, we have returned to it in later books. The sequel, if you like, to Templar Revelation is our 2008 book called The Masks of Christ.
Oh, I'm going to write that down.
Which, it brings our research up to date. I should actually point out that Clive particularly is the best researcher in the world, because I'm going to make him blush. Because he's Mr. Lateral thinking. He'll look at a fact, and he's very big on fact and evidence. Everything has to be evidence led. But he'll look at a fact and say, wait a minute, that reminds me of something I saw in a book, 3 years ago, not a book about this, but about, and then he put it all together, the jigsaw makes a picture. So hurrah for Mr. Clive.
A gift, very gifted. Yes. Yeah.
Well,
wonderful. Clive, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but for those of you out there, Jeff has such a variety of people that have been drawn in by Oak Island into this group, and to talk about all the subjects that spin off from that. I just wanted them to know a little bit more about both of you as well, in case they weren't familiar. And I was quite taken with your research on the Shroud of Turin, and there is a Templar connection there. There was a Templar family that owned what was heralded as the Shroud of Turin, and then it disappeared for 300 years and resurfaced with Leonardo, or around Leonardo's time. Was it de Chalon something, the family name? I'm struggling to recognize.
The Descharnay family, who were sort of minor French nobility. Because the thing people always say with our immediately with our book, our conclusion that Leonardo faked the Turin Shroud, is saying, hang on, but the Turin Shroud was around 100 years before Leonardo da Vinci was even born. It was being displayed in this small place in France. So, how can Leonardo have done that? And obviously that's one of the first things that we thought when we got into this. But when we looked into it, we found that shroud that was being displayed, there's no pictures of that shroud. There's only descriptions of it. And basically everyone that said it, looked at it at that point, said it's a painting. I mean, the local bishop said it's a painting. He even said he knew who'd painted it. And the thing about the image on the Turin Shroud, the one thing it's not is a painting. And then that shroud was acquired. It was obviously a big holy relic that was drawing people in and drawing their money in. But it's been in a very minor family. It was then acquired by a much bigger family, the Savoy family. And then it kind of disappears. It wasn't for as long as you said, it was for 30 or 40 years. Then it reappears during Leonardo's lifetime, or it is put back on display.
A shroud, that is. A shroud.
Yeah. Yes. It's supposed to be the same one, but everyone's reaction now is completely different. Whereas the first one, everyone said it's a painting, and the Pope said it's not the real thing. Then when it suddenly reappears, everyone's saying, this is amazing. We don't know how this image got there. It must be a miracle. The Pope then says, no, it's the real thing. And he says it can have its own special chapel and that. And we just think, and it's only from then that we can be sure that the shroud that's around today is the same one that was around then, because people actually made copies of it, so you can tell that's the same thing, whereas the old one. So we think, yes, there was somebody did a kind of painted one, a painted relic. And then people said, that's not going to convince everybody. Let's get a better one. Let's get somebody better to do one that can do something
Let's
that looks
think,
miraculous.
who could do that? Yeah.
And the first time, we think the first time it reappeared and put back on display was in 1494 in a town in Italy called Vercelli, which is very close to Milan, which is where Leonardo da Vinci was working at that time. So... but sorry, go back to you. The reason I went down that route is that there's probably something more to it than that, because this family that the shroud first appears in is about 1350, 1360, the Descharnay family. One of the Descharnay family, the ancestors, just not that long before, had been one of the leaders of the Knights Templar at the time the Templars were suppressed. Now, this sparked a whole theory of, well, maybe the Templars had the genuine shroud of Christ, and somehow it had passed through into this family. And for various reasons, we found that didn't really work. But it does seem a hell of a coincidence that a family associated with one of the Templar leaders in France, one of the final leaders who was, executed at the time of the suppression, that it should be his family that, 40 or 50 years later, this story begins with. It's almost as if this group are trying to create this hoax for a particular reason. And then when that didn't work, they get a better one made, for a better one for an age when people are getting a bit more skeptical about relics, something that they can pass off as an authentic miracle. So there's a Templar connection, as there is, a lot of these avenues kind of draw into the Knights Templar, and as all the avenues do, so there is a Templar connection there, but that doesn't mean the shroud is authentic,
Right.
I did appreciate the documentary on the Turin when it was tested, and your theory as to what was behind the shroud. And I'm just going to give a quick disclaimer here. There are a lot of people of faith that follow Oak Island and are probably present today. The authenticity of the shroud should be considered history and not proof or disproof of a great divine. So I just wanted to put that out there, if anybody's wrestling that with that today. But it was fascinating what the two of you came up with as to how Leonardo may have created this phenomenal object of art, of sacred value, and of course, he being one of the greatest scientists, a father of science and art, it is an important object of history as well. And for myself, it was a revelation to me, and no pun intended, that early photography was being practiced at that time.
Yeah, because I mean, yes, the argument we put forward in the book is, people say the shroud is a miraculous image because, the most famous thing about it is you can only see the image properly when you look at it in photographic negative, and that it behaves like a photograph, but it's been around for so long it can't possibly be. But we actually found, yes, that is how the image got there. It is actually a photograph by Leonardo da Vinci. Actually, it's even better than that. Go on, you say it.
It's not. Thank you. It's not just a 500-year-old photograph by Leonardo da Vinci. In part, it's a 500-year-old photograph of Leonardo da Vinci, because the image of the shroud, which is of a crucified man, the front and the back, was basically made in 3 stages. The front from the neck down, and then all of the back, but the face is Leonardo's.
It's certainly of an older person that you would think. I mean, Jesus was supposed to be, what, 33-ish years old,
Yeah.
and the face looks like a much, much older person.
Yeah.
Well, not much older.
Yeah.
No, but I wouldn't necessarily agree with that. But it's, I mean, there are things that you can see, just going back a bit to it being a fake. The things you can actually see from the image. You don't have to, have a background in, great research or anything. If you look at it with completely new eyes, there's dead giveaways. For example, the face at the front is at a different angle from the head at the back. The chin is level, and at the back, the head is tilted slightly. There's all sorts of things. There's a line here at the bottom of the neck, which effectively makes the man look beheaded. Now, was Leonardo, I mean, there's a limit to the amount of symbolism you can imbue the image of a crucified man with, but, being presented with the opportunity to do this in his own way, was he actually saying, because he could have got rid of that line, but it's there subliminally telling us that one who was beheaded, like John the Baptist, is over one who was crucified. It's a Johannite statement, as he would say, for those with eyes to see. I mean, that's speculation on our part, but I think it's a valid speculation, because, as I say, the line is there, and Leonardo was a genius. If he wanted to get rid of it, he could have done. But there it is.
It was interesting for me watching that documentary. This is a while back. I don't remember the name of it. For those who are curious about it, I'm sorry, I don't. But what one of the scientists was saying was that if you were to take a cloth and put it over somebody's face, and then bring it back out, it would be so distorted looking.
Yeah.
It wouldn't look like the Shroud of Turin. It would be this, and they actually recreated that for us.
Yeah.
And it was this weird, almost alien looking visage.
It is, and it's one of the things that when we first got into this, one of the first realizations for us, that however the image got there, the cloth had to have been flat at the time, so it didn't wrap a body. Now, once you've got that, then you're thinking, I say a fake, a work of human ingenuity, because then you still have to say, well, how did the image get there? Which, I mean, we had to look and say, could it possibly be done using materials and technology that were available in Leonardo's day? And we found, yes, it could.
Yep.
That he had basically a camera, I think called a camera obscura, that he is known to have worked with. He experimented hugely with optics. He was trying to capture an image from life. And yes, we found materials to it. And in the end, we made our own. The only way to prove that you could do it using materials and technology around in this day is to actually to do it, which is what we did. This is back in 1994 that our first book came out.
Yeah, we did it again. We did it again for our first documentary, which was made for the BBC. It was made by Sir David Frost's company, David Frost of Frost Nixon fame. He had a television company, and I very briefly worked for them, and I was telling them about our shroud research, and they said, brilliant, let's do it. So they took us to Vinci, and they took us to to Italy, basically, to Tuscany, and we did another replication, sitting there in the hot sun. It was brilliant. For this documentary, that was our first documentary. We've done loads since then, including one by the National Geographic. But the interesting thing was that when, in 1995, for the first documentary, the David Frost one, obviously they wanted to get other people, art historians, artists, academics, to agree with us or to say it was possible what we were suggesting. And they couldn't find anybody, really. That was 1995. Fast forward to the early days of 2001, and National Geographic found loads of people who would agree with us. You know, it's
course they
as
did.
it was in the air, you know, in all that time, you know.
Yes.
Mm.
No one wants to be the first one to step out on
Right.
something that could be very controversial.
Yeah, it was.
and-
We were the first people, and believe me, it was. Yes.
And we've continued
Well-
to find evidence, because that book's been through 2 revisions where we've found new evidence and added it, and then you know, we still keep finding new evidence right up until this day. So not just evidence for Leonardo's involvement, because there's this thing that being him, the great joker, you know, he's not just this genius, but you know, I think a lot of things people now appreciate is that he was actually a great joker, and he used to have fun with his audience in his paintings, you know, with things, and the fact that he used his own face for the face of Christ on the shroud. And that's something, you know, you compare the images with the surviving images of Jesus, you know, you can see it's the same man. And in fact,
Same images of Leonardo.
Images of Leonardo,
Yeah.
sorry, yeah. And I mean, one of the best moments we had was when we were doing this documentary for National Geographic in said 2001. And as part of that, they'd also interviewed some people that believe the shroud is authentic, you know, as they should for the balance.
Mhm.
And there was an Italian artist called Luigi Mattai who makes life-sized sculptures of Jesus for churches and cathedrals based on the man on the shroud. So he's obviously studied that image really, really closely to reproduce these things. And they went to film him actually making one of his images. They didn't actually tell him what the show was about. They just said it's about the Turin shroud. They didn't say it was about, you know, our work particularly. So they just filmed him, and he's on camera saying, you know, he's saying how he actually goes about making this the images. And then he just says, you know, one thing that's always you know, interested me or surprised me is how much like Leonardo da Vinci our Lord looked, you know. And it's like,
My word.
show, you know, he didn't know what they were. I mean, if they'd have known he was talking about the show was about our work, he probably wouldn't have said
No,
that.
Right.
He's very Caucasian. He's European in his facial features, and it's a marvelous image. You know, it's a very handsome, beautiful.
Yeah. But
Absolutely.
Leonardo was beautiful. You see, Leonardo was beautiful. And
Yeah.
I mean, just backtracking a bit on what Clive said, the interesting thing is that, you know, because people at school, including me way back, obviously, but, you know, we were told that Leonardo was this great genius, and we thought, yawn, you know, what do we care, you know? But actually, you know, art historians, and to some extent artists, have recreated him in their own image. But basically, Leonardo did not like academics. He often sneered at them in his writings, saying, you know, they stick their noses in books when they should be out learning from nature. I mean, it's possible that he was bitter because he wasn't allowed to go to university because he was illegitimate and he couldn't.
Right.
Those were the rules in those days. But even so, he really hated academics. So, you know, that's one thing. But the other thing is that he was, you know, as Clive said, he was well known as a joker, but he was more than that. He was actually a very accomplished conjurer and illusionist. And he, you know, he used to, you can imagine he was great at parties, you know, pulling golden balls out of people's ears, and he built robots that walked and did things, and they were just amazing, you know. And he was behind the special effects for the shows that they put on at courts. And so this is the mindset of the man who created the Turin shroud. So he had the mindset, you know, he had the ingenuity, and he had the face for it.
And tall for his time, 6 foot.
Yeah, it was 6 foot. Yeah, and that's something else about the shroud actually. I mean, this is a fact, by the way. We checked this in quite interesting ways. But the Turin shroud is 6'8" at the front and 6'10" at the back. You know, and I mean, there's no doubt about this. We've double checked it, and actually, on one occasion, it's a bit of a complicated story, but I was curator for the National Medium Museum's exhibition called The Unexplained, and the shroud was the centerpiece. Well, it was actually the photographic. What do I mean? Not
Transparency.
Transparency. Yes, photographic transparency. The full length thing. So it's like seeing the shroud. It was on a special light box, so you could look down at it, and so it was amazing. But yeah, and it was in a special room, and there were visitors coming around, and I just sort of went and talked to them about it, and every single one of them said, he's very tall, isn't he? He's really tall. And while it was there, Clive, who was exactly and very handily 6 foot tall himself, lay down by the side of the image, and we got people from the museum to help us do this. And basically, there's no doubt, the man is 6'8" and 6'10". Now, so and the reason for that is that it's a projected image, or 2 projected images, front and back, and which can be any height from that to, and again, though, it's Leonardo being very clever, subliminally, psychologically. You get disturbed by the image. You get disturbed by the strange, beautiful face and the neck and the extraordinary height of the man. Yeah. But it's subliminal, it works away at you. It's a bit like his very disturbing, his John the Baptist. The face is beautiful, but it's kind of leering at you. It's a really odd look.
Do we have a
they are odd. They look his imagery of John the Baptist looks as if this image is trying to withhold something. I know something you don't know.
Yeah.
Expression. Yeah. And a bit malevolent, a bit.
Yeah.
A bit. Disturbing is a good word.
Yeah.
I don't know if is it possible for Jeff to put that picture up?
Is that
the St. John the Baptist one?
Is that this one here?
Yeah. That is very disturbing and curious. It's a typical Da Vinci. That it's not a cuddly saint, it's not an austere, beautiful saint. This is, as you say, it's somebody with it's almost like a blackmailer's expression, isn't it? He kind of, I know something about you.
Yeah, I've got you. Yeah.
And that finger pointing gesture. This was one of the key things for us when we started to, first of all, we were just looking at, could Leonardo have done the shroud? Excuse me. And if so, how could he have done it? And then we kind of got onto, well, why did he do it? Well, obvious reason, it's just for the money. He was paid to do it. But then we kind of got drawn a bit more into that, say the codes he put in his painting. And a key one for us is this finger pointing, which here, John the Baptist is doing it. But then we realized that Leonardo had this kind of obsession with John the Baptist. So, whenever he was commissioned to do a religious painting, he would put John the Baptist in if he could. But if he couldn't, if the subject of the painting was such that there was no way you could put John in there, he would use this gesture as a kind of reference to it, to John. So it's like whenever he could, he always gets this reference in. Excuse me a moment. So that was a key moment. Yeah, that's a key symbol for us. I'm also thinking while we're looking at pictures, and as Lynn was talking about, Leonardo as the Joker, I wonder if it's time to look at another one. Do you think?
Yeah. Before we go there, real quick, I wanted to point out that one of our viewers, Judy Rudebush, has also pointed out in this picture the 2 fingers to the chest that she noticed. That he's like tapping on his chest there with the 2 fingers. I didn't know if that, and as you have said before, I've heard you say in some of the other shows you've been on, Leonardo didn't do anything by mistake. He meant every piece of what he painted into these. So I wondered about that. Had you noticed that before? I'm sure you have, but
yes, although we haven't actually made that much of it. But basically, the symbol. The painting is conventionally explained by John being the forerunner, the herald of Jesus Christ. So he's kind of pointing up and saying, pointing the way to God, kind of thing. But those fingers are actually, no, you actually look at the message. Yes, he may be pointing up to heaven and to God and divinity, but those ones are saying, it's me.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's all about me.
Yeah.
And that's this thing that we kept finding in the Leonardo works, is that he's always positioning John the Baptist as being the more important one. He does all his paintings of Jesus, but he'll always have an element of John's symbolism that actually makes him more important. I mean, the key image for us, another one was the Virgin of the Rocks, the big one.
Yeah, I've got that one here.
There was something when we actually wrote the book, there's something we entirely missed, but we've since corrected.
Yeah, most people entirely miss it. But yeah.
If you know, there's two versions of the painting. There's one in London, and there's one in
one, didn't you? You sent,
yeah,
you sent.
And there's one that's in Paris in the Louvre, which the Paris one is the more important.
That's it. Yeah.
I mean, should I do the John symbolism?
Yeah, you do the John symbol, and I'll do the other thing. Yeah.
I mean, just very roughly, another key one for this. This is Virgin of the Rocks. It's a painting supposedly showing. There was a legend, because a lot of people have the problem when they read the Gospels of saying, why does Jesus' kind of mission starts with him being baptized by John the Baptist, according to the gospel stories. And there's an obvious kind of question there of, well, why would a sinless Jesus need to be baptized anyway? And also, the person doing the baptism, at least at that moment, is in the superior position. They're bestowing a sacrament in the same way that, when a priest baptizes a child, they're kind of bestowing something. So they're in the superior position. So to overcome that, there was this legend created in the early days of the church that what actually happened was, during the flight into Egypt, Mary and Joseph took Jesus off into Egypt. During that point, they actually met up with the infant John the Baptist, and at that point, infant Jesus blessed baby John, and therefore kind of gave him the authority to baptize him later in life. This isn't a gospel story, but it was something to overcome that kind of logical problem people had with it. And that's what Leonardo was commissioned to paint specifically in this painting for a chapel. But as usual, he had a bit of fun with it. And what we see in the painting is you've got the Virgin Mary apparently with baby Jesus. The angel that's looking out at us is the angel Uriel, which was the traditional protector of John the Baptist when he was in the desert. So you've got, apparently baby Jesus with his hand up, blessing and kneeling baby John. So this moment of conferring the authority to baptize him later in life. But then you think, hang on, the babies are with the wrong protectors. The baby John the Baptist is with Mary, and the baby Jesus is with John's traditional protector. They seem to have got the identities the wrong way around. I mean, actually, well, supposing you have the correct identity, or the obvious way around, you've actually got the reverse of the story, that it's Jesus that's kneeling in submission to the blessing of John. And there are a couple of other little clues in there that's what is intended. For example, the baby with the angel is putting their hand into a pool of water. Obviously, John the Baptist baptized through water. You've also got this strange positioning of hands of the Virgin and the angel that art historians have drawn attention to, and saying, well, what's this kind of claw-like gesture there? And when we were looking at it, we were realizing there's we don't know. The babies look identical, as if there's deliberate confusion of identity. And we thought there's no actual label on there to say which baby's which. And we thought, actually, there kind of is, because if you look at that arrangement of hands, as if there's an invisible object there.
Between the hands.
Between the hands. So you've got one that's on top of something and a finger cutting across like this. What would go in there? When you think a severed head. And that's above the baby that most people take to be Jesus. We think that's a sign. That's John doing the blessing. Yeah. So that was an important part of decoding for us, along with other paintings. So we put that in the book. And following all that logic, there was something we entirely missed until Lynn spotted it a few years later.
And it doesn't actually, I suppose, say much for me that I was, as far as I know, the first person in 500 years to notice this. But anyway, I did. And once you see this, you can never unsee it. Right. Well, bit of background. Leonardo was commissioned to paint this by a bunch of monks called the Confraternity of the Immaculate Conception, which might have given him an idea. And basically, as Clive said, the only thing basically they had a frame that they wanted using, and they just wanted him to depict this scene. That was all they said to him. So he had free reign apart from that. So the rocks of Madonna of the Rocks, or Virgin of the Rocks, were completely his idea. And didn't he use them? Talking about being disturbing. Okay, now, forget everything you've ever known about this painting. Forget even it's supposed to be a religious painting. The biggest thing in the painting is made of rocks. So look at the Virgin's head and look at what's just behind her head and to the side. Right, bear with me on this. 2 enormous testicles. And going up from them to the skyline with a vein up the middle is an enormous phallus. It's even got a little spurt of weeds coming out of the top. It's the biggest thing in the painting. I can't point. So, yes. So, yes. So, yeah, that's it. Yeah, that's the giant, as we were saying in this country, giant willy. Yeah. Yeah. So there's the two, the Virgin with the 2 big testicles, and then the giant willy going to basically the skyline. There are indeed other naughty images in the painting. There's a hand coming out of the cave on the left of the painting with a sort of ladies' bits. And there's all sorts of things, actually. I mean, this is basically what he thought of the Holy Family. This is not the best religious painting in the world.
Certainly what he thought of the idea of the Immaculate Conception.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I mean, basically, if once you see it, you can't unsee it. We went to the Leonardo exhibition at London's National Gallery a few years ago, and we got talking about, something in one of the paintings that we'll have to show you to some people we just met. And what they did in the exhibition was they had this version at one end of the room, a huge room, and at the other end was the other version. There's 2 versions of this. And I was with these people who were, went to art galleries and went to exhibitions all the time. And I just basically described the thing. And they looked and they went, oh no. And, we've given talks to and showed this to, hundreds of people at conferences. And usually as the very last thing that we present, for obvious reasons, it has a bit of a gulp factor. And yeah, there's two, you can actually put money on the fact that there are 2 instant reactions. One is, and the other is falling around laughing. But this is Leonardo for you. I mean, he put astonishing things in his paintings because he was a brilliant psychologist. Mm-hmm. I mean, he knew that people only ever see what they expect to see or hope to see in a painting, which doesn't say much about me, does it? But I mean, so if they look at a beautiful religious painting, they talk in hushed tones and practically pray in front of it, not knowing what they're actually praying in front of. But yeah, so it was quite something. But this is Leonardo. I mean, lots of people would be really shocked. Well, yes, he was shocking. He was a shocking person. but he wasn't a pious religious painter at all. So, there you are.
Yep, that's definitely pretty interesting. And like you said, once you point it out, you can't really unsee that.
Yeah.
For sure. Knowing that he was a jokester, or someone who liked to, make people laugh. I mean, that's certainly a way of doing that.
Yeah.
We had one of our. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Sorry. I read an account many years ago. I hope I don't misrepresent it, but it's always stuck in my head, and I don't remember where I read it. But he apparently was quite proud of dressing up and processing down the road, and because he was apparently a very handsome fellow, and he liked to wear his fine clothes. But this comment was that he thought he should be able to walk down the street naked because he thought he was a fine specimen of a human being, and he wanted to be everybody else to think the same thing. So, and I was thinking about that as you were discussing the painting. I thought, oh my goodness.
Well, how naked can you get? Yes, actually, of course. How can I put this delicately? I wonder who the model was for that.
I think he thought very well of himself.
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, he did. Yes, he did. He was very, very vain, and also he had this big thing about legacy. He knew he had a very limited repertoire of skills with which to imbue symbolisms and his message for the future. As we've all been saying, he never put anything in a painting. He never wasted a brushstroke. He never put anything in a painting that was accidental or coincidental. It was all meant, every single little bit. But actually, just going back to the giant thing, we went to a talk once where somebody was going on about a tiny little flower in the corner of the Virgin of the Rocks being a phallic symbol.
Yeah, there's two versions of the painting, and no one's ever been sure why, because they're exactly the same dimensions. And as Lynn said, the monks that commissioned it already had a frame, so it was the contract specified the size. Both versions of the painting are exactly the same size. They think, well, why did he do two versions? And the other ones ended up in London. And in that one, the rocks, I mean, you can still see it once you've seen it in the Paris version,
which is that one.
This one.
Yeah.
And then you can see it, but it's not quite as obvious in the London one. And various other clues to do with the way the arrangement of the children and the arrangement of hands is different in the London one. Actually, I think you might have the London one, Jeff.
Yeah, let me see. I'll switch back here and then bring it up. I believe it's much more clear. It doesn't look as old. I think it's this one here.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah.
And it's in this one, the two children don't look anything like each other. One's got a halo, one's got a John the Baptist cross, although that some people think that may have been added later. You can see the arrangement of rocks is there, but it's still not quite so obvious. But down in front of, it's hard for us to see here.
Yeah.
But yeah, right. Yes, that painting right at that flower right at the bottom, which has that very big. Was it a stamen? Thing.
Yeah.
And we were reading in a book. Before we'd actually realised, before Lynn had the revelation, somebody talking about this painting, and they're saying, well, that is very strange. That thing sticking out, it actually looks like phallic symbolism, but there isn't any phallic symbolism in the Paris version. So what was that? And then years later, we thought, actually, yes, there is.
Yeah, there's something rather big here. Yes,
but it is. And these things all kind of reinforce each other, because you think, well, somebody completely independently of us has identified that flower as having, making some kind of statement based on phallic symbolism. And that's all they said. They just, it's a paragraph in a book somewhere. They said it's there. We don't know why, and it's missing in the other painting. So then, Lynn sees this years
Well,
later.
I see the thing, yeah.
Yeah, now it's not entirely Lynn's mind.
There's a precedence for it.
There's some backup to that that's going through his head.
Yeah.
And as well, it also all the things that that argument I outlined about the John and Jesus imagery in this, which we say pieced together during the research that turned into Templar Revelation. Everything in leading to that deduction in the Paris painting is missing in the London one. It's like it's taken it all out. So it's like a kind of compare the images, spot the difference, which actually draws your attention to those things. And again, these are the things that reinforce, because when you're dealing with symbolism and imagery, you've always got the thought in your mind, am I reading too much into this?
Right.
Is it my preconceptions?
Right.
So when you've got a second painting that allows you almost like as a control that you can check it against, suddenly you realize, no, actually, this is really there. It's not just us seeing what we want to see.
I'm very pleased to hear it.
Yeah. Well, I'm thinking of all the things, and the John symbolism that runs throughout Leonardo's works. And again, it's there over and over again. He's always putting John the Baptist over and above Jesus. Various other paintings and that. So, and that's what started us on the thing. Well, okay, that's something that Leonardo had. Maybe it was just an eccentricity of his. What else is there before him? Could he have been part of something else? And then, we're drawn, say, to the Templars, who they had a thing about John the Baptist. They are supposed to have worshipped the severed head. And then you start to piece all these different other groups around that are playing with the same symbolism. And eventually we trace the whole thing back to, and again, you're thinking, well, maybe there's these people with heretical ideas about the relationship between John the Baptist and Jesus. And the other major theme in it, of course, is Mary Magdalene. And you think, well, okay, people come up with heretical ideas and pass them on. It doesn't necessarily mean they're true. So in the second part of the book, we go back to the Gospels, the history, what was actually, the real story going on there. I'm finding that so much of what these later groups believed can be justified or, fits in with what New Testament scholars have been saying. The whole thing about the relationship between Jesus and John the Baptist, New Testament scholars and historians have realized for a long time that it's not the way it's portrayed in the Gospels. It's known, for example, that in the very early days of Christianity, there was a rival religion which regarded John the Baptist as being the true Christ. That religion is still around for 500 years. It's recorded, by people as obviously as a heresy for 500 years into the Christian era. Then it disappears, but it's still around in the Middle East, and it actually is around to this very day.
Is that the Mandean?
Yes.
The ones, yeah. They are followers of John the Baptist.
He was their great prophet.
Yeah.
In a line of prophets that they had. But actually, if you look at their sacred book of John, which is one of their few sacred books that's been translated into English, it actually gives a very different account of Jesus' baptism. Because it's a historical fact that John was very famous in his day. He had this enormous magnetism, and people flocked to be baptized by him.
Right.
Including women, which people overlook. He was absolutely egalitarian with this extraordinary thing, whatever it was, that he was offering, repentance and absolution in a way. But women also. But yes, in the Bible, there's John actually groveling in front of Jesus, saying to people, "Behold the Lamb of God, and I'm not worthy," and but in the book of John, the Mandean's book of John, basically Jesus begs John. He says, please baptize me. You're baptizing all these other people. Please baptize me. And John says, no, I'm not going to, because basically I've heard too much bad things about you. You're a false prophet. You usurp my following. I'm not going to do it. So Jesus begs, and finally John says, well, all right, then I'll do it, but against my better judgment. So he baptizes Jesus, and they describe how when he's done it, a dark goddess called Ruha throws a black cross across the Jordan, and Jesus gets out of the Jordan, and John, who is very angry by this time and obviously not very pleased with himself for having done something he didn't want to do, but he says, go and take thy dung stick with thee, which is strange. But anyway, so basically it's an entirely different version of the biblical story of the baptism.
These are in the sacred texts of the Mandeans.
Yes.
This is their ancient text that they passed down. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, as I'm fond of saying, there are 35,000 different Christian sects in the world, and it's very difficult to begin to comprehend the differences between one and another. So that's quite something. That's quite something.
Well, of course, the Mandeans aren't actually Christian. That's the thing. I mean, they're absolutely not Christian. They are Johannites. They follow John. They never ever wanted to follow Jesus. To them, Jesus is the enemy. So,
right. So Christedness is about being anointed.
Yeah.
So that was the manner in which I was approaching that comment. But I'm wondering if we kind of approached it back to front. The Da Vinci Code focused on the Last Supper.
Yeah.
And might we have a look at his masterpiece, his very famous masterpiece?
Yeah, I have two pictures of it. I have the original here. That it's a little grainy because it's so old, but I'll go ahead and bring that up now. One question too, and we can kind of touch on this later. Speaking of the Templars, there was one of the I believe this was Judy also again was asking what percentage of Templar books out there for us to read do you feel are putting false research out about the Templars? Is there quite a
there's a difference between research and the conclusions you draw from it, because the one thing you can definitely say about the Templars is there are many mysteries about them.
Absolutely.
I mean, it always gets us with kind of mainstream historians who say there's nothing strange about the Templars, nothing secret about them. And our response to that is always, if there was nothing secret about the Templars, they weren't doing their job.
Exactly.
Yeah, and why are we still talking about them today?
Even in their own day, they were into military strategy, which means spying.
So that's secrecy.
They're involved in diplomacy, which that's kind of spying as well. Yeah. They're involved in the transfer of large amounts of money from one place to another, which needs all the authentication of codes and things. And of course, everything about them is about secrecy. That's what the order is. They had to be, even if the just conventional depiction is correct, they still are a secretive order. But then you get all the genuine mysteries about the origins, the suppression, the survival. They're all valid. And obviously, on top of the actual information, the research, you can come to lots of different conclusions, and you can put together an argument. And I think some of those we agree with, some we don't. Some people will disagree with our interpretation of what kind of the secret was. But as for the information, people know the stuff that is established in the history books. I think everyone agrees on. There are some things, I think the people often exaggerate, for example, the number of Templars that were killed at the suppression. There's that scene in the Da Vinci Code movie where you see them being burnt at the stake and hundreds of them. And, we'd actually worked out that probably only 1% of the members of the order actually died during the suppression,
Oh.
either executed or died under torture. 99% went free. So things tend to get a bit exaggerated in a lot of the literature, and some people do make obviously completely crazy claims sometimes, but by and large, we're all trying to piece together this mystery, and we all come to different conclusions.
I'm sorry.
No, I was just going to say too that they also wanted to kind of portray the fact, we got them and they're taken down and nothing to worry about now, right?
And that wasn't true.
Right.
Yeah, but I appreciate that you broke it down to a percentile, because I have not done that, but I firmly think that quite a few survived. But you have to also ask, are you talking about just the man on the horse, or the 3 to 6 men it takes to keep that one knight on the horse?
Yeah.
And then the farm, the noble-born manager of the farm, who has been is a Templar, running the farm. So who is a Templar? And organically, it really did spread out into a network, and they were involved with the merchant guilds. So they had extended families that would support the Templar Knights themselves. They had 2 centuries of family input in support of this order that was tied to the merchant guilds. So I too agree that quite a few did get away, and I do get frustrated with the academic community, who comes at it from the point of, well, the Pope said they're over, they're gone, and 20,000 knights just disappeared overnight.
Right.
Well, these men, a lot of them were fit, healthy. They still had their fighting skills. They still had their gear. They had ships, what have you. They're going to use it.
Exactly.
Spain and Portugal, they just changed their name.
Exactly. Scotland, exactly.
Yeah.
And the thing is about, we're all trying to find what the Templar secret was. Did they have the Holy Grail, the Ark of the Covenant? Did ours is that they're Johannites, which they in our reconstruction they picked that up during the Crusades, during the Holy Land. Because the Mandeans, who are now these days very restricted to areas of southern Iran and Iraq, or that's actually not true. They're communities all around the world now, since before the recent Gulf Wars, they were confined to an area then. But in the past, it's known they were much more widespread around the Middle East, and it's known the Mandeans were in towns and villages where Templars had property, where other Crusaders had. Some kind of interaction is actually quite likely between them. So we think they adopted it from there. So that's our answer.
Yeah, well, of course, the Templars did adopt John the Baptist as their patron saint. And the numbers of times you read anything about their history, June 24th, this happened, June 24th, that happened, June 24th, this happened. It's constant. It is a significant date.
Yeah, and there's no particular reason. No one's ever really explained why that should be. And then you have the severed head imagery, which some of the knights during the trials actually said was the head, or represented the head of John the Baptist. But with all these things, it's not saying that all the thousands of the members of the orders were all this, they were all Johannites or all Gnostics or whatever. It is a group within them that had this secret, within the leadership. So we don't think that every single Templar knew what the secret was. Most of the Templar knights, we're sure, were just what they appeared to be.
It was a hardcore. It was an inner circle hardcore.
Right.
But I mean, people say, oh yeah, but they were called the poor Knights of Christ. You can't get away from that. But it could be that they were being very clever, because as Gretchen pointed out, Christ just means anointed one. So they could be referring not to Jesus Christ, but to John Christ. John also presumably being anointed. So poor Knights of Christ, exactly who are we talking about there? You know, so I mean that's just an idea. I have no evidence for that, but with everything else that we know, it is quite likely, shall we say? You know. But as Clive said, I mean, yes, it's every, you know, we can't stress enough that we're not saying all the Templars were Johannites. That's just, you know, no, absolutely not. But
question,
hardcore, you know.
I have a question for you. Do you, you are, if both these men are connected to the Mandeans, do you think that they are of the Davidic bloodline? And if John hadn't been executed, then he would have made, I don't know what I'm trying to ask. He you know, would he then have been maintained leadership?
Yeah, I mean, personally, I don't actually go with the you know, even Jesus being of the Davidic bloodline. I think that was something that was brought in later, or whether, you know, maybe he was trying to promote himself as such at the time. I mean, it's a big question, but I'm not entirely persuaded myself. And the whole idea of John and Jesus being related only kind of hangs on one particular bit of one of the Gospels. You know, the meeting between, you know, Mary when she's pregnant with John the Baptist's mother, who's pregnant, and the evidence is very strong that that whole little episode was invented later in order to make a specific point, because you know, in the the Magnificat, isn't it? These are the words that the Virgin Mary proclaims when she's meeting John the Baptist's mother.
My soul doth magnify the Lord, and my spirit rejoiceth in God my Saviour.
Which
that
is
whole thing.
Yeah, that's the thing Mary's supposed to say, and it's become the sort of key text for the for Marian Christians. And the interesting thing is, when you actually go back and look at the origins of that story, in the original, it was actually John the Baptist's mother that said that, not Mary. So I mean, what they think is that, that there were a lot of kind of, if you like, gospels or hymns or poems about John the Baptist around in the early days that were created by his followers, and some of those actually were adapted into the Gospels, but they kind of changed them around to
refer to Jesus, not John.
During the Council of Nicaea 325, quite a lot was changed, and there were other councils that subsequently made changes as well. But I think the Ethiopian Bible is quite a hefty tome compared to the Western Bible. They have 30 further books than the Western European Bible has. So Orthodox, you know, the Ethiopian, these differences are intriguing. Forgive me, I'm suddenly wanting to get into the Last Supper.
Okay.
Because we were talking about anointing, so it brings up another figure, because our book wasn't just about John the Baptist. So
no,
else.
No, it was about herself. Yes. So yes, if we could look at the Last Supper. Yes. So this is obviously well known for its own sake, but to a whole generation, I suppose, it's well known through the Da Vinci Code.
Exactly.
So again, it comes down to us. Actually, I woke up one morning. We happened to be in Glastonbury on a trip, and I woke up one morning and thought, because we've been studying Leonardo's work, but we didn't have anything with us, and in those days we didn't have a phone or anything or laptop. We're on holiday, but I woke up and I thought, it's a woman next to Jesus, it's a woman. So we went all around Glastonbury in the bookshops looking for a book of the Last Supper, so we could see, and I think we found one in the end. And anyway, we looked at this, and since that moment, obviously we put that in the Templar Revelation, but we realized there's lots of other stuff in the painting, and also The woman, who is she? Well, there's a giant M shape created by the composition. So that presumably is the initial of her name. Actually, what the eye is drawn to her, and I'm just looking at this actually and noticing for the first time how the light falls on her face more than anybody else's at the table.
Oh, it does, doesn't it?
Yeah. Basically, she's the main one. The light is falling on her. And if you notice that her clothes are the mirror image of Jesus's. So she's wearing a red cloak and he's wearing a red robe, and she's wearing a blue robe and he's wearing a blue cloak. It's almost literally as well as if they're joined at the hip, So they're each other's other half. There's an awful lot in this painting. There's the John gesture. If you look to the right of Jesus, it's like the disciple is saying, "Remember John," even while you're doing this. There's things like, we all know that, the Last Supper was there to instigate the communion or the Mass, where Jesus is, where the bread represents Jesus's body broken on the cross for us, and the wine represents his blood spilt for our sins. But if you look at this table, there's no great chalice in front of Jesus. There's a tiny glass with about an inch of wine in it. There's not much wine on the rest of the table. And as for the bread, yes, there's bread on the table, but very, very little of it is actually broken. So is Leonardo saying, I don't believe that Jesus made the sacrifice for us? Or maybe even, I don't accept it. But if you could just move the picture to your left so we can, yes. So the guy bending down, yes, that one. That's well known to be, it's a fact that was modeled. That's Leonardo himself. But again, notice he's got his back to Jesus, as he had, as Clive pointed out before. So basically, yeah, there's an awful lot to unpick here. There's other stuff here. There's Peter with his hand across, we'll have to call her Magdalene, across Magdalene's throat, which is, it's interesting because it could be that he's got his hand on her shoulder, but no, if you look, it's actually like a knife. It's foreshortened. You see it on the side, it looks like a knife. So there's an awful lot going on here. There's more than that, of course.
And Peter is holding a knife behind his back for no apparent reason.
This here,
That's it.
Yeah.
Originally we did write in the book that it's a disembodied hand. It didn't belong to anyone at the table because before the painting was restored, and this is the restored version, believe it or not, it's suffered a lot over the centuries. You couldn't actually make out what was going on in that part of it. But when they did restore it, you can now see it's actually kind of it's the twisted hand of Peter, but holding this knife, and everything is symbolic in there. So you think, well, what's he holding a knife? Presumably these are references to stuff in the Gnostic Gospels of the hostility between Peter and Mary Magdalene.
Technically, the answer to that is that he's going to leap for Judas, who's obviously the baddie, and is just, Jesus just said he's going to betray me. But actually, knowing what we know from the Gospels that are not in the New Testament, the so-called Gnostic Gospels, such as the Gospel of Philip, the Gospel of Thomas, the Gospel indeed of Mary Magdalene, you discover some quite unpleasant things about the followers of Jesus. For example, you discover that Mary wasn't popular among the others. She was kind of the Yoko Ono of the group. She was divisive. Obviously Jesus is besotted with her. That much is clear. But the men, particularly of the following, they really couldn't take her at all. They they couldn't understand why Jesus gave her so much time and took her seriously. And she did not behave like a woman of her time and place. I mean, she was on her feet, arguing points, answering questions. There's one bit among the group where there's something, I think there's 42 questions being discussed. And of these 42 doctrinal religious questions, Mary either asks or answers 39 of them. And the men who think it was their due to be first and foremost in this group, although there are other women there, but the men, particularly Simon Peter, they hate this. They keep appealing to Jesus and saying, why do you allow this woman to do these things? Why do you allow it? And Peter really hates her. At one point, Mary goes to Jesus and says, I'm afraid of Peter because he's threatened me and he hates me and all the race of women. And on the other hand, Peter goes to Jesus and says, let Mary leave us because women are not worthy of life. So as long as Jesus is around, he's obviously the ultimate smoother over and diplomat, but the group is at each other's throats. And it's very interesting because traditionalists say, you shouldn't take the Gnostic Gospels seriously. They're a load of rubbish, don't even bother with them. But it's very interesting. Sometimes they are a bit fanciful when they talk about other worlds and cosmic stuff. They make all that up. But when they're talking about the people, Jesus and his followers, they leap into sharp focus. And it's obviously they're all drawing on the same source, be it an oral source or a written source we no longer have, because they describe exactly the same things. They describe Jesus being besotted with Mary Magdalene, the boys in the band hating her, and Peter threatening to kill her. And if, as the traditionalists say, it's all nonsense, you shouldn't take any notice of them. And they were just, the Gnostic Gospels were just invented by sort of airy-fairy kind of, Gnostics who didn't have any handle on anything. Well, in that case, surely if they'd invented them, they would have made it all sweetness and light and all happiness within Jesus's group. It would have been a magical Disney-like, love affair with each other getting on really well. But no, there's this massive row going on the whole time. A real unpleasant vibe. No, I do not accept for 1 minute that the Gnostic Gospels are without value. In fact, I think they're of tremendous value, but only when they're talking about the people, when they're talking about their idea of the different rungs of heaven and the different rungs of hell. You can forget that. But the actual people, no, they're onto something.
Well, from what we know of the culture at that time, it was very strict, and women were seen and not heard. And you could even go so far as to say economic slavery. And when you married into your husband's home, you were a servant to the household, your mother-in-law, etc. And of course, you had to raise your children as well. But it was a very strict culture to the level with which Westerners cannot grasp.
Except in Egypt. And Egypt at that time had the most, not by today's standards, but had, for the standards of the day, had the most egalitarian society in the Roman Empire. Women could own businesses, could instigate divorce. And there's, it is known not from biblical sources, but other sources, evidential sources, that John the Baptist had his headquarters for what was a massive sort of church, John the Baptist Church. But his headquarters was in Alexandria in Egypt.
That's why.
And it's also, most modern biblical scholars are agreed that Jesus started off as one of John the Baptist's disciples. So it is possible that, it's probable in that case that Jesus was over in Egypt for quite a while. And it's very probable that Mary Magdalene was, as one of John's disciples, because he had female disciples. So she either was Egyptian or really liked the Egyptian way of thinking about things, because, the mission arrives in Galilee with all the traditional Galilean men who are, basically, misogynists. Let's be honest. As you say, part of the traditional outlook on women. And there's this feisty woman who won't shut up, who takes the floor at meetings and insists on lecturing them. And Jesus thinks wonderful, and they just don't know what's hit them. They can't get their heads around it at all. But so there's the stamp of Egypt on her. She behaves like an Egyptian woman, even if she wasn't. She'd been exposed to the culture.
Yeah, absolutely. One thing too, we got about just a little more than 20 minutes left before we hit the 2-hour mark. And as I mentioned before, I'd try to keep these to about 2 hours. I wanted to kind of head back a little bit, if we could, back towards the Templar a little bit. One thing that was noted, and I heard you mention in one of your other speaking engagements that you had, that there was the possibility, we all heard about when the Templars originally came about, but there was also a bit about the Knights Templar could possibly have existed before 1118. Is that something that you guys have, that you two have found and looked into, or?
Yes, there are. The thing we always say, everything about the Templars is a mystery, including their origins. Because we have to remember that the only account that we have of the Templar origins was written 50 years after the event, actually by somebody that didn't like the Templars. So this is where the date of 1118 comes from. Personally, I think the evidence is actually stronger. It was 1119 for the official kind of founding, not that a year matters. But there are some intriguing references from a few years before that seem to be talking about some very similar order. To the Count of Champagne, I think, off the top of my head, who's talking about something very similar as if it already exists, and he's someone that later joins the Templars. So, yeah, there's at least the idea of it seems to have been in the air 4 or 5 years earlier. And I think the one thing, again going back to the idea that the mainstream academic idea, nothing secret about the Templars. Whichever way you look at it, even if the Templars were just exactly what conventional history says they were, there's certainly a conspiracy going on around their origin. Now, the conspiracy may have just been to found an order, to defend Christendom, because the idea of the Pope having kind of, in a way, his own personal army would have got a lot of resistance from kings and things like that. So you had to do it in a very kind of behind the scenes way to get all the deals done. So even if it was no more, the order was no more than it appears to be, there's certainly something going on. The question for us has always been, because there are kind of two views of the secret side of the Templars, which is either that they were, they started off being just what they appear to be, but they discovered something while they were in the Holy Land. They came across an artifact or an idea. They met up with Mandaeans, perhaps something like that. Or did somebody in Europe know that there was this whatever and go looking for it, and you created the order as a sort of cover for going to look for this thing? We've never come up with an answer to that because nobody really knows, but it's one of those these suggestions, this apparent evidence that the Templars were around a few years before they're supposed to have been, does kind of point to this idea of them knowing that there was something,
an agenda.
Yeah, and now that the Crusades have opened the way, you can go over there and look for it or pick it up.
Bernard de Clairvaux was so involved in that process. He was a mastermind behind the order. So how did this group of 9 men gain prime real estate access to the king in Jerusalem? They have the Temple Mount that they're using as their stables, but they're digging underneath. But this is a new order that hadn't been tested, no real credentials other than the power behind the Cistercians and Bernard de Clairvaux being close to the Pope. To me, it smacks of a secret mission to go and seek out, and they had to be physically fit, capable men, dangerous men, who could defend themselves and whatever it is they went to discover. That's certainly my take on it from an anthropology point of view. They shouldn't have been given such close access to the palace.
Something's right. There's something's going on behind the scenes. It's, and of course you get that flavour all the way through pretty much, everything. Every point of their history that which you don't get with the Knights Hospitaller. There's.
Or even the Teutonic Knights.
Yeah. So it's not people now, as the complaint's often made. It's people kind of projecting now and making a mystery where there isn't one. It's rather the other way around. Yes, the mysteries have given rise to all kinds of theories, and all kinds of people trying to create new Templar orders based on what they think the original Templars were like. But it's the mysteries that have made that happen, because you don't get mysteries about the Teutonic Knights, as you're saying, and people trying to form a new form of Teutonic Knights with a big secret at the core of it. There's something,
it's
not made of nothing.
Indeed. I had a big thought, and then it left. So I apologize.
Well, while you're thinking about that, go ahead and think about that for a minute. But one of the things that I wanted to...
It was cool.
Well, you will come back to you. And in the meantime, I'll just ask this: we heard about all the charges that were brought against them by the King of France at the time, and working with the particular Pope at the time, and brought these charges up against them. What's your take on those charges? Was that something that that was completely made up? I mean, what's your take on the charges that was to bring them down?
Well, it's fashionable now, certainly among academics, to say, the charges of basically homosexual practices and blasphemous acts such as spitting and trampling the cross and idolatry, worshipping a bearded severed head. All of that was just trumped up by the King of France and the Pope because they wanted to get their hands on the Templars' money.
Right.
But just look at the nature of the claims in the light of our work on the Johannite inner core. Trampling on the cross. I mean, yes, it's horrific, obviously, to Christians, but if you're a Johannite, that's what you would do because you don't recognize Jesus as Christ. Worshipping a bearded severed head, John was beheaded. So certainly we don't think that they were made up. And in fact, there's evidence, from some of the knights' own accounts, not all from under torture, that in fact they did. That they didn't all see the head but they, at a certain level of initiation, they did have to abuse Christian symbols. So that would certainly go along with the idea that there was something in the charges leveled against them. Doesn't, of course, stop the French king and the Pope also wanted to get their hands on their money.
I mean, for me, the thing is that if that's what the king was after, he didn't get the money anyway. So, but I mean, the key thing for me is the Chinon document from 1307, well, a bit before, that was sort of rediscovered, or promoted in 2007 for the 300.
Yes, promoted is a good word.
Yeah, that had it a while. But it, that explicitly says, 5 of the knights, 5 of the leaders, questioned by the Pope's men, no torture, promise of, absolution, everything like that. And, all 5 say, yes, when we were initiated, we had to deny Christ and, and the cross. I mean, only one of the 5 said they saw the Baphomet head idol. All denied the homosexual practices, but they all say, yeah, that's part of the initiation. We had to do that. Now, so yeah, that was part of it. When that document was published in 2007, the explanation was put out with it that, well, that's because if they were captured, by the Muslims, they would be forced to do this. So this was kind of a practice for that. And I'm thinking, well, one, it doesn't make any sense, and two, none of them actually say that. They just say, yeah, the initiation said you have to do this. So yeah, I think the core charges, even if they were interpreted in in some other way, they do seem to have happened. These things, they were doing these things. Some of these things, certainly that part. And I also think from the way, when the charges or the accusations were first made to the King of France, and he sent people in to basically infiltrate and join the order to see if this happened at their initiation, and they said, yeah, it does. So that was a part of it. Now, how do you explain? We've got the explanation that Lynn said, which fits the Johannite idea. People may come up with other explanations, but we think that the fact is, if that was any other historical event, I think people would say, well, yeah, that happened. The evidence is strong enough. It's just a matter of how you explain it. So yeah, there was something about the order.
Gretchen, did your thought come back to you yet on that?
It did.
Okay.
My thought was that it was such a large organization, a corporate structure, really, modeled on the Cistercian success story, and there is scope for many secrets, and I think that's where some of the confusion comes in, is because the inner workings with their finances, they had to keep their precious items secure, etc. So there's plenty of scope for secrecy and secrets.
And also it was, let's not forget, an initiatory organization. So so to get to the next grade, you had to go through an initiation, and all of that was kept secret. So
certainly, as you're saying, certainly as you're saying, not all of them are pleasant.
Yes.
Like this is a very crude example, a hazing in university in the USA, where you get put through a battery ram of obstacles before you can join a fraternity, a frat house in the US at a university. So I don't mean to lower the tone at all. I'm just thinking in my head a modern example of
well, I mean, to some extent, absolutely. But in the case of the potential Johannite content of these initiations, it's a religious, it's a heretical.
That is a big deal. That is a big deal. Yes.
And the other thing, with the Templars being that kind of order, as you say, big corporate order, is that also they were there to try and find out information about the other side. They were actually open to all kinds of ideas, and it's something we've been looking at more recently, because we tend to sort of always think, well, what happened when they were over in the Holy Land? And there were all kinds of sects from left over from the early days of Christianity, and Jewish sects with different ideas. And the Templars, they were interested. They wanted to know stuff. But it's only kind of quite recently we've been looking more into the contacts they would have had in Spain at that time, because big Muslim community there that brought stuff in. the order in Spain and Portugal it did seem to be a kind of law unto itself that did things that that they actually did have Jewish and Muslim members. They allowed people into the order, which didn't happen anywhere else. They had women members in Spain and other places. That's established, that's documented, even though their own rule said they couldn't have. But at the time of the suppression in Germany, they had to have special arrangements to house the women that had been found in Templar holdings who were sisters, the sisters of the temple. And again, a lot of this stuff is just kind of brushed aside in the mainstream, because they just know it was an order of knights who'd taken monastic vows. No, they seem to have been assembling information, and so it's very easy for us. Another thing we looked at is that the symbols they used on their seals, particularly in France, they used Gnostic images that would take old Gnostic images from things that had been declared heretical centuries before. And I must have known.
What's interesting. I picked that up watching some of your interviews, your talks, and they were open to, I believe, Islamic scholars, Judaic scholars. Muslim culture, Moorish culture was very advanced. At that time, going back 900 years, and the Templars, being pragmatic, would have benefited from the scholarship in these other cultures.
And also, I think it then becomes inevitable when you're doing that, because even if you're an order that you officially exist to defend strict Catholic Christianity. Yes, actually, seeing someone put up about the Abraxas seal. Yes, that's the Gnostic one. Interesting. Abraxas was also associated with John the Baptist, which is interesting.
Oh, I didn't know that.
It's from they're both kind of heralds of the
Yes,
Abraxas
that
symbol.
in one of your books. Do you have the Abraxas symbol? Which book do you recommend that you've written that might be in? Do you remember?
It must be in Templar Revelation.
It is.
I'm sure.
Okay. Because you've written so many that might be. So get this book.
Yeah.
Yes, that's Tom Hanks.
What I'd like to do also now, here's like the burning question that so many of us have, including me. And we'll kind of start to wrap up here a little bit with this, but the Templars. Now, you had kind of alluded before that things didn't go down maybe the way the history books or people would like to say, that they were all wiped out. We got them all. We didn't get their money, but so what do you think? You talked about some of them just going on with life as they kind of were before. Maybe some of them getting their properties back that were taken from them. Talk about this after, Friday the 13th, 1307, and the years going forward. What do you think happened with them? Did they possibly, and the ships that disappeared?
Well, there were two fleets, actually. They had one fleet at Cyprus and one fleet at La Rochelle in France, and both disappeared from the record. So if you have ships, and the treasury, when the French king went to seize all their stuff, had very little left in it. So they'd taken it, they'd gone. Specifically, one person, actually, Gerard de Villiers, Gerard de Villiers, who was a preceptor. He seemed to be in charge of the Exodus, so presumably he took the fleet, he took the treasure. Where did he go is the big question.
Yes.
So I mean, we know that, as Clive said, in Spain and Portugal, they were treated very well by the monarchs there, and they were basically allowed to just change their name. So they're no longer Templars, but they were the Order of Christ or whatever. And so essentially they just went on there. But the Templars as such, some of them went to Scotland because Scotland was pretty free and tolerant and accepting of them. and actually to some extent England, but England's always a bit dodgy. And they might well have gone elsewhere. I mean, they had an awful lot of the wherewithal. They had 2 fleets, and they had money. And they were, as Gretchen said, they were, the elite fighting force,
Yes.
and adventure and sort of macho adventure seeking was in their DNA, apart from anything else. So suddenly they were free in a way, to go and do whatever they wanted.
Right. And they had the wherewithal to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
But I think, it's possible to identify, a lot of them, because, always going back to this thing that if they had this big secret, most members of the order wouldn't have known about it. They were just what they appeared to be. And you can find them, most of the 99% that went free, join other orders, go into monastic orders. Some of them lived their lives out on the old properties with a pension. So you can identify where most of them are. And they just carry on life as before. But you're looking for the inner group. That's the one you want. And that's when you start thinking, well, where did their ships go? Because the records of everything that was confiscated from all the Templar properties are still around, and they're very detailed, and there's not a single ship in any of them. So, so therefore they couldn't have, there's all debate about how big the Templar fleet was, but even if there only been 2 ships, that's all you need to get, load them up with treasure or whatever.
Right.
And horses. Gerard de Villiers also took all the horses.
But,
150 of them.
Yeah.
I saw a question has come out from somebody about did the Templars make it to America? I mean, the short answer is we don't know. They could have done, because you've got the 2 things when it comes to Oak Island. It's like, was it the Templars as they were in at the time of the suppression or during the official lifetime of the order? And then you've got this whole thing with Henry Sinclair.
Yes, that's where I was going to go next. Yeah,
in the 15th century. Could it have been him? Because there's a Templar connection. The idea that he funded the expedition with the Templar treasure that had actually gone to Scotland. So did it go directly into America? Did it go to Scotland and then over to America and Oak Island? All kinds of permutations, and it's frustrating. There's nothing solid to hang it on.
But I mean,
I want someone to get to the bottom of that pit.
Well, well, doesn't everybody? Well, I mean, the thing is, you start off the basic questions. Could the Templars have gone? Yes, they could. They had the ships, they had the money, and also they had the sense of adventure and the driven sense of adventure. Could they have got to America? Yes, they could. Could they have got to Oak Island? Yes, they could. I mean, there's nothing stopping them in as far as one knows, having done that. But then, of course, it sort of the evidence fizzles out. But I mean, hopefully, you guys will probably find something very soon.
I hope so.
Maybe. Yeah. Maybe.
Well, actually, we've come up with an amazing amount of research along the St. Lawrence River, and there are other authors too who have done so. Lucas Antoni, a producer from Livorno, Italy. The town was built by the Medicis. Veronazzo is hailed as a hero there for having crossed the Atlantic Ocean. Granted, he was, by all accounts, not a very good person, and he met a sticky end, but he did cross the Atlantic and accomplished a great deal for his kingdom. I believe he was hired by the French king. Forgive me. The French king hired him, and I suppose he wants somebody nasty to do something like that. But it's a shame. But the Native Americans did clobber him in the end, basically. But there are interesting ruins along the St. Lawrence River, anomalies that are worth investigating.
Yeah. And again, like, is there proof of it? No, there just is not. It looks like there may be some proof, and I think you guys have alluded to it before, talking about them being up into Scotland and working with. I guess there was actually and I had written it down, but it was the battle that took place up there, with Robert Bruce.
Yeah, on the 24th of June. Yeah,
and all of a sudden they get help from this great force of fighting men or whatever. They get some help, and was that the Templars, or a remnant of them?
The bit I always like about the Templar story in Scotland, because they certainly were up there. We've been to the village of Temple, as it's now called, which one of their very first properties outside of the Holy Land. So there were Templars around there, and then when finally they get round to England invades, they finally get round to following the Pope's order to round up all the Templars. They can only find 2 of them, and they're both English. And the people that give evidence against those 2, who are, they confess to things and are again just let off. The people that give all the evidence against them are the Sinclair family. It's like, was this a setup or what? Well, we need to give them something. Oh, it's a couple of English guys.
Well, they're English.
Yeah.
Disposable.
So nobody does know what happened. There were Knights Templar in Scotland. Nobody knows what happened to them.
Right.
So they had to go somewhere, and they had to go somewhere for a reason. Because remembering what they're faced with is not execution, as in the Vinci Code movie. Basically, the only ones that went to the stake were those that confessed, repented, and then withdrew their confession. But if you could plead guilty to all of the things they were accused of, and you were given a penance and absolution, and then you could go. You were still held by your orders, by your oaths, so you had to go to another order or enter a monastery. But they were not big punishments, so there's not, the Scottish Templars could have just held their hands up and said, "Yeah, we did that. Now can we go?" But no, they just disappear, as they do in other places. Because they weren't being threatened with the greatest punishments, only if they confessed and then withdrew their confession.
Right.
That's the only way. That's the only way you get executed. Other than that, you're kind of let off.
Interesting.
Which I find is actually a more compelling reason to think there was something secret going on.
Right. Yes.
You could get out of it so easily.
Right.
And yet some people did choose rather to run for it.
So
there's a reason for that.
Do you believe they had any are the religious artifacts that are maybe claimed to have, like the Ark of the Covenant or the menorah?
If they'd have had the Ark of the Covenant, the Ark, one of the main things about the Ark was that it was supposed to be a weapon of mass destruction, and they were soldiers, so they would have used it in battle. So they almost certainly didn't have it.
Very true, huh?
Yeah.
But, they could well have done.
Yeah.
But till we find it, we don't know.
Yeah, very true.
It's great to ask these questions because it helps the thinking process, for one thing. But
Gretchen, did you have any final thoughts?
No, perhaps they might come back at some point and discuss Rennes le Chateau. The Templars are bound up in the mysteries of the Rennes le Chateau, I believe, and Jeff has quite a few Templar followers, so I'm one of them.
Yeah, we do for sure. Man, I tell you what, this has been fascinating. I know we could go on for hours, but I try to, like I said, I try to keep these to 2 hours just for the sake, and especially for you guys, because I know your time difference over in the UK, and it's getting late over there, and I don't want to hold you up. But this has been truly fascinating, and I would love to have you come back. I know there's so many things that we didn't. The Black Madonnas. I mean, there's so many things that we could keep going on, and the Magdalene. I mean, being a Christian, I really struggle with some of that. I'll say some of that, not all of it. I do know that there was suppression of the female in all of this and in the Vatican and everything, and so I'm really kind of torn on much of this. But you have amassed so much information that I'd love to hear more of your thoughts on it at some point in the future. If you
love to come
We'd
back.
love to come back. We've had such a lovely time. At least I
Thank you. It's a privilege.
we have.
It's a privilege to have you both here today. I've
Oh, my
really
goodness.
appreciated my time with you, and Jeff, always thank you for your invitation and having me back too. So.
You were the perfect person to be here with us. Absolutely on
Thank
top
you.
of my list to help. And of course you brought the your connection with Lynn and Clive, asking them to come was. I thank you so much for that, and I am so
It was a
honored.
like
Yes, thank
moment
you.
for me. I just thought, wait a minute, maybe Lynn would like and Clive would like to come and talk.
Oh, when you told me about it, I was like, "What? No way! They would come
Yeah,
on the show?" I mean, I was like, "I'm so honored to have you both. I really am.
Oh,
It's
Oh,
truly
well,
been
everything in
fascinating."
back then, yes. No, we'd love to.
no, we
And,
would love to, absolutely.
And to
Thank you.
talk paranormal on your other show.
Yes, Beyond Our World. John was in there, and he saw all this, and we kind of talked about it before. But yes, we have to have you on Beyond Our World because, man, it's one of those ones where we might have to do a two-parter because it sounds like you have a lot of interesting things to say in that area. So, and the book you have a book, the Stargate, Stargate Conspiracy.
Yeah.
That's not about what you think it might be about.
Well, that has to do with Egypt in a way, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. It does. Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Oh, there's a whole big story there.
Oh,
I would love to hear it. I want to hear it. That's probably going to be the next book I get. Yeah, audio book. Oh boy, we could go on.
Well, thank you, both of you. And, thanks for all the people watching and sending in.
Well,
questions.
indeed, absolutely. But Gretchen, it's been lovely to see you finally.
At last, I am honored and really happy to have a chance to talk to you both. And Lynn, white or red wine?
Well, actually, strange enough, neither. Gin.
Okay.
Meet a woman after my own heart. Okay.
Oh, well, you'll have to get together.
I don't know, but us over here, us Americans are thinking, well, you're in the UK, you can't live that far apart, right? Well, that's not necessarily true, but we have no idea. I've never been over there, so I don't know. But at some point,
you'll have to come and show you around.
To London. I can get to London. Yeah.
I would love that. Yeah, Gretchen has already invited me to come over, and she said she would tour me around to some of the places. Rawson Chapel. I so many things I want to see. I just have to see them for myself.
And win the lottery.
Yeah, well, we're working on that. Yeah.
Oh yes, I know. And then our wonderful stonemason friend Sean Williamson, that's over there working with the Sinclair family, and Sean
is so gifted. He is truly extraordinary.
Yep, he certainly is. Well, again, I'm just going to wrap it up. Thank you again so much for being here today. It's been my honor to have you on my show. And Gretchen, thank you so much for filling in and coming on as the co-host. Or the host, my host, guest host.
Guest host.
Guest host. Thank you so much again. Folks, thank you for being here today. And don't forget, we have the links for their website and also their Patreon channel. And as you heard Lynn mention that she also has the newsletter that she does. You got to check this out. Really, honestly, check it out. And it's so much great information. And as you heard them say, we're going to try to get them to come back on the show not too long in the future, hopefully. And we will continue this wonderful discussion. Again, thanks for everybody being here today. If you hit that subscribe button, I'd appreciate it very much. And give us a thumbs up. Let us know how we are doing on our content. Y'all have a great rest of your day. And we will see you next time right here on JFree906. Bye-bye now.
Take care, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye.